Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Today's show is the launch of a new series. This is our Educators Eden series. And our show topic today is connecting with students. How much is too much? Not enough? So, our Educators Eden series is an opportunity for us to shine our spotlight, our focus, and our attention on educators. And we have some incredibly passionate, creative, and committed educators around the world. We are here in this series to help them create for themselves, their students, peers, administrations, and institutions Eden. Literally paradise. This is Educators Eden. And like most of our series where we focus on specific professions or professional fields, whether it's human resources or management or the legal field, part of it is my experience. I've been an educator, been honored to be an educator um, pretty much my entire professional career, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So that's a lot of what we're talking about. It's something that I do and I have a lot of experience in. And I started educating college students about 17 years ago now at this point. So it's something that I have a lot of on the ground experience. And again, it's been a joy and an honor in my professional life. So that's part of why I picked this specific series. I typically start with series that I have a lot of experience in, and then I'm able to share knowledge anecdotally, and I also can have enough of a, a chronological experience that I'm able to also share some of the things that I've done that didn't really work well. So that's part of why we do this. The other part of it is I've worked, of course, with a lot of educational institutions and individuals in my corporate education and training practice as an attorney. And also, of course, I am a faculty member, and I've relatively very recently accepted a full-time teaching appointment. So I'm very fired up, excited, enthusiastic. I do love this. I love teaching. I love education. And so that's why we're here. And I don't know if we have enough dialogue in our just sort of general societal discussion, and certainly even in our specific educational focused society, just sort of appreciating, honoring educators. So here we are. We're sharing our Educators Eden series. Our specific topic for the show is connecting with students. How much is too much? Not enough? And of course, again, always we're focused on how can we surpass our goals. My focus here is again uplifting, supporting, praising those who are in education and who want to be in education and who love it. I do acknowledge in some of the show notes, and I have to. This is certainly a field where there's an intense amount of dialogue. I actually think maybe more dialogue than some other fields that I'm involved in professionally about some of the things that people see that aren't optimal, that need to be improved. And there's no disagreement globally. There are many issues in education, from pre-K through 12 in the States, or through the equivalents around the world, from early childhood development through primary school and secondary school, and certainly into the college and university level around the world, and adult education and training programs. And all of these, there are serious issues, things that need to be improved. And I mentioned in some of the show notes what some of those are. Everything from the students themselves, especially for people who've taught for longer periods of time and witnessed change. Are students less motivated? Are students less prepared? Are students less committed to excellence and just the joy of just the quest for knowledge? In some parts of the world, are students do students perceive they're entitled to either everything being easy or all of their own needs being the center of attention, or to whatever the quote the good grades are? I mean, these are things that, oddly enough, if you talk to people who work with early childhood development, and you talk to people who work with literally adults on the job doing organizational development and professional corporate training, you're going to hear a lot of the same discussions because a lot of these issues are very similar. Now, of course, the age of the students, their capabilities, the different types of specific content challenges change. But a lot of these themes about the students, about education in general, how are educators viewed? Are we respected? Are we supported? How about funding, and how about just the value of education in and of itself without a heavy focus on these outcomes, whether it's test scores or grades or retention or grade distribution or in corporate education programs and training programs. Then there's all types of things. Did people actually change their behavior? What did people think? What was the student or attendee evaluation? I mean, there's so much pressure on educators. It sometimes can make an educator who came into education and stays in education because they love it, can make them sometimes feel that this isn't Eden for them. They're not able to just do the fun stuff. And the fun stuff, if you're an educator at some level, is just a basic rudimentary love of knowledge itself. You just like to acquire it. Obviously, that's the first part of education. You have to acquire knowledge, and usually people who come into education like or love acquiring knowledge. You like this. It makes you happy. You're curious about things. How does that work? What's that about? And you like taking in new information. And then the second part is that makes you an educator, different from just everyone else who loves acquiring knowledge, is you also enjoy transferring and sharing the knowledge, which is a very specific skill set with different, challenges and opportunities depending on what type of individual you're working with. Are they, a 4-year-old? Are they a 47-year-old? What the content level is, what their experience is, what the setting is. So the purpose again of this series is to take it back to the fundamentals. Why are we educators? And what can we do to make it our own little paradise on earth? And yes, there are real challenges in every single aspect of education, in every single part of the planet. And it is absolutely real. It's not imaginary. But my argument is, yes, within the world as it is, or at least as we perceive it to be, being a little bit of a pragmatist, which is, of course, one of the foundations of all of my programs, what can we do within that? What can we do within that so that we like it, so that it's good for us, so that education continues to be a positive part of our lives? If education becomes a negative part of our lives, and I do believe that I've encountered some instances where that's happened to people, then we're not in Eden or paradise, and some people actually get to a point where they're just miserable. And we just, every program I do, every professional service I deliver, everything is all about, surpassing your goals and this joyful aspect of life. And if you're miserable and education is something where someone feels they can't go on, then I respect that, and then absolutely it's probably not salvageable, or it might not be salvageable in the way that they're doing it. In other words, maybe someone loves education, they love the intake of knowledge, the acquisition of it, they love the transfer of it, but maybe it's not appropriate for them to be in a formal setting. Maybe it's not appropriate for them to do it that way, but maybe if they start to teach in another setting, right, they'll love it. So that's part of what we're doing here. So, everything is on the table for discussion and analysis. My focus, of course, is always going to be about what can we do, action. We're always, again, going to be looking at what can we do to surpass our goals. And again, the bottom line is you really should be happy about this. This is your life. That's what I'm referring to. And specifically, this is your teaching and education activities in your life. So I put some quotes in the show notes. One of the first quote I have in the show notes, because I love quotes, is, "There is only one good, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance." Socrates. Now the concept here is to kind of, again, take us big picture. What is an educator? What is a teacher? And why do we do this? And it's not that we are doing it because we want to make sure students pass a certain test score. We're not doing it because we want to ensure that we have a certain retention percentage. We're not doing it so that we have a certain positive feedback rating in our corporate education program from a client. No, that's just sort of an ancillary byproduct. And if it's part of the environment we're in and we're happy in that environment, fine. But that's not the purpose in this. That's not why we do it. We do it because we love it. We love it, and we love it because it. And this is, maybe an extreme perspective on it, but if there's one good and it's knowledge, and there's one evil and it's ignorance, then the teacher and the educator is literally on the front line for all humanity. And throughout historical time, that's why I think it's important that we look and see how our educators treated and valued throughout different time periods, because it's not about just today. Sometimes people get, again, focused and mired in these current modern challenges, and we just get so short-sighted that we lose big picture of the purpose of it. The purpose of it is good, and I do believe in this. I really do. You can look at any aspect of the society: political, legal, economic, cultural, artistic, anything, and you're going to come back to this concept of knowledge and ignorance. And there's just correlations just all across different spectrums of society. So we see it today in modern parts of the world where we don't even have an opportunity for children to have a basic education, in parts of the world where you have very, very low education and very, very low literacy rates, very low literacy. You tend to see a lot of economic challenge. You see a lot of social upheaval because there's a correlation. Knowledge, I'm in agree with Socrates. It's good. Ignorance is evil. I also included a second quote in the show notes from more recent times. It says, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. So looking at education from this big picture and this sort of elementary level of why are we in it? How do we make an educator's Eden? What's the purpose? My argument is it's about good versus evil, and it's about a powerful weapon that we're using to change the world. I believe that. I really do. And so when we're looking at the topic of our show today, connecting with students, how much is too much? Not enough. Some of the foundational information I've kind of gone over to this juncture. Sometimes people will come and say to me, well, you're preaching to the choir. You're talking to our group of educators. You don't have to sell us on it. But I actually don't agree with that. In fact, some of the most sort of vociferous attacks in different areas and industries or fields is from people who will practice it. Because people who aren't educators and aren't in it don't really think about it that much typically. And it's the same thing with, lawyers or anything else. A lot of the most negative feedback is from people who are in the field. So that's why I'm laying this out, because that's my perspective. My perspective is that it's a noble, and it's a valid, and it's a greater good than just ourselves, and it's not tied to some specific time period. That's why some of the modern things people sort of get caught up in the details of, to me, obscure the bigger picture and the purpose of what we're doing. And so I am trying to speak to those who are in Eden, educators Eden, or they aspire to be, and I'm also trying to address those who really feel that they are just done with education and there's nothing that can make it an Eden, and that they've heard it all before, and that it's just a disaster. It's a disaster of a profession, and they don't want any more to do with it, which is fine. I'm not arguing whether that's right or wrong. I don't believe you can actually, conclusively make that determination for individuals. My argument, though, is I do need to preach to the choir. I do need to share with people why I'm so excited about it. Why is it such a powerful thing in my life? And when I'm talking about this specific subject of connecting with students, where am I coming from? So that's why I spend so much time on the foundation, and it's of course our first show in this series. So connecting with students, how much is too much? How much is not enough? The challenge is, we all know as educators, and when you again look back in historical records of educators don't just go to acquire knowledge for themselves. That might be someone who's a researcher, right? I just want to acquire knowledge. And educators, you have both parts, right? I want to acquire it. I love it. Give me more. I want knowledge. I want to know. And then you want to share it. You want to disseminate it. And that's the thing that's the difficult part. I have heard, in modern times, sort of a almost a negative, I guess, this idea of the sage on the stage. The idea that, lectures are in some sort of way a negative, which I don't I don't agree with personally, and I don't even understand it. I mean, you look at historical human experience, was Socrates, was Plato a sage on a stage? In any religious tradition, when you look at the religious texts and original, um, spreading of the religious gospel, those people were educators, and they were, yeah, you could say they were lecturing. I mean, you could say that a sermon is a lecture. I don't think that is a negative. I mean, the whole point is that there's so much knowledge in the world, no matter where you're alive or when you're alive or wherever you are in the world. And some people just don't have a natural affinity for getting out there and investing and absorbing it. It's just not some people's, natural desire. For those of us who are educators, we naturally love absorbing information. I just naturally like this. It's fun for me. But I also am an educator, so I don't just want to get the information and then just sort of hoard it to myself and then work with it on my own. Some people do that. That's a whole different field. But I want to share it. And there's nothing more exciting to me than the transfer of knowledge. And having someone else who wasn't aware or interested or motivated, and now they are, and they've changed, and what they've done with it. That's why that Mandela quote is so powerful. It is a weapon. It's a weapon not just against ignorance, but it's a weapon against every type of, societal, system or structure or things that are negative. I mean, it's knowledge is power. And I want to spread that, and I want people to gain that tool, that weapon to go out in their lives and change it. Everything that we do in all the programs I do in every format and about surpassing people's goals, I mean that. I'm not in this just because I like to sort of pontificate and listen to myself talk. I mean, that's probably part of it. Well, actually, that's not true. I don't even listen to myself. I never even listen to myself back because I just can't stand hearing myself. But the point is, I want other people to have the best outcomes in their lives. And I understand that knowledge is just fundamental to that. So that's why I get so excited and passionate about everything that I do. When we talk about connecting with students, I'm coming from this perspective of that the first part is we do need to be able to indulge and to acquire knowledge as much as we can. And ideally, we should be in a professional environment where that's supported. We don't just sort of learn something one time and then we can turn around the rest of our lives and just quote, transfer that to other people. I have to continually refresh and update and enhance my knowledge base. So we need the time and the resources. I know around the world that's a legitimate complaint in our field, that we're just not provided that opportunity for continuing education, the time that we need to sit in contemplative thought. I get it. I'm not saying that's not real. But my argument is when we look at connecting with students, there's so many discussions afoot in every sector of education and about how do we connect with students. And my argument, bottom line, is this. Connecting with students is incredibly important. And connecting with students is incredibly misunderstood. Connecting with a student does not mean that I share their same life experience. It does not mean that I share their same socioeconomic experience. It does not mean that I share their same religion or their same ethnicity or their same color or their same national origin or race. It does not mean that I am able fully to see the world as they see it. It doesn't mean any of that. I completely reject the concept that it means that we're friends with students, because in all my leadership management programs, we focus just so much on leaders are not liked, they're respected. Educators are leaders. I'm not going to yield on this. The reason why is because the educator has more knowledge at that time than the students, and the educator is excited and passionate and fired up to share knowledge, but the educator is the leader. There's some discussion about peer education, that you kind of cobble together a group of students, and even though none of them may have any experience or knowledge in the area, you sort of give them resources and let them loose, and they'll just sort of teach each other, which is interesting. There will always going to be students in a group that's just not customized. They're always going to have your sort of more intellectually talented and curious students, and you're always going to have talent students who are sort of average, and you're going to have students who really are, sort of below average in terms of their curiosity or their basic, skills and abilities. Can a student who is more intellectually gifted transfer knowledge to other students? Of course, and vice versa. Everyone learns from everyone. When we're an educator, my argument is we are the leader, we are the expert, but it's a two-way street. When you transfer knowledge, you're transferring knowledge to the student. The sage on the stage is transferring knowledge, but you're also getting information back. It's a simultaneous situation where even if one person's speaking, you're still, if you're visibly able to observe the students, you're able to read their body language and eye contact. So, in other words, my first big teaching experience, I taught at the University of Texas at Austin in the business school in the undergrad, and I taught huge lectures in these big halls that are built like little miniature stadiums. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere, let's say, around 120 students I had per section. That's one section, right? So the professor is there lecturing, and then you have all these, very nice seating arrangements where the students are, arranged around this large room, and then they're listening. That doesn't mean that the information is only going one way. And my argument is I'm connecting with them even when I'm speaking and they're not speaking at that moment. That doesn't mean they're not connecting. What is connection? Connection is that we are at the same. Connection is the ability to have the student engaged and experiencing a transfer of knowledge. That's a connection. They're engaged. Obviously, if they're asleep or they're comatose or something of that nature, I'm not kidding, they're not engaged. So that's the first part, and that's what so much of our education tools and techniques focus on, and we're going to do quite a few shows on how do you engage them, right? That seems to be the challenge for a lot of people. The easy part of that is you're fired up and engaged. Even if it's something that people don't care about, if you're up there and you're really excited and passionate and just, and you're a great communicator, meaning people understand what you're saying, people understand how you're trying to express it. They'll listen and be engaged even if it's not really interesting to them. So that's part of it. But they're engaged, and there's a transfer of knowledge. So what they're hearing something, or they're reading something, or they're thinking something. It's transferring. Now, does it have to be that it's synchronous, that you're saying something at the same time they're hearing it? No, we have distributed learning now that we can do over the internet or all other technology where I might be conveying it, and then later at a different time they're engaged and they're absorbing the knowledge, but it's still happening. I'm still connecting with them. And to connect with them, there has to be a sharing, not just of the content. And I do believe this as educators, and I think this is really important, especially going forward as the technology continues to change, that the value of what an educator brings to content is not misunderstood. The educator does the same thing everybody else does at some basic level, right? We all could basically go to some generic idea of a library, and then we read what other people have done and researched, we absorb it. That's all part of it. And there's a lot of excitement, in education at every level with this idea that, look, with technology in many parts of the world, now not all, there are parts of the world that don't have, the infrastructure to have internet technology. Just, you need electricity, you need some sort of conduit, whether it's a phone, or a computer or whatever, but it's spreading. And the idea sort of is like, look, there's all this knowledge, everybody in the whole wide world and the whole, universe in theory, I guess, that could log on, can go and see every scholar and every text and just learn. Yes, that's totally true, and it's exciting and awesome, and I love it, right? But that's not educating, and that's not the transfer of knowledge, and that's not connecting. That's just opening up this sort of virtual library and saying, go for it. Few people will do that. Usually people who love knowledge. And you're educators, you're part of this Educators Eden series, you're just doing that. That's why we're so excited, right? The challenge is, though, that's not the majority of people. The majority of people, they weren't going to their library that existed for free already. So you have to engage them. That's what the educator does. That's the part of the special talent of this. The educator is saying, look, yeah, the library's been open, right? But I'm going to engage you. And I'm going to do everything in my power with every part of my being that communicates, whether it's my voice, just my voice, my writing, Maybe it's my entire, person, and you can see me, or you can hear me, or you can just read what I'm writing, but I'm going to engage you. That's the part that you need an educator to do, and that's a specific skill. And so when we talk about connecting, if you're engaging, that's the first part of the connecting process. And that is hard to do. And I think sometimes in the sort of macro discussion of education, the idea is, look, we don't need corporate, educators to come in and do a program. You take our staff, tell them to log on to this website, boom, done. All right, maybe if and it's possible if the material was set up and there was a high quality educator who created that material at an elite level where they could engage someone. But just sort of a generic, here's some content, now I'm done, I've taught. You haven't. You haven't. Handing out, go look at this website and click on this acknowledgement, for another student. Hey, here's all this material. Go out there and teach yourself, whatever this concept is. No. Will you always have some individuals who do this? Yes, we've always had that. That's the autodidact, right? We always have had that. I'm not worried about that group. They educate themselves no matter when they are alive in history. They're always educating themselves. You don't need to worry about that group. I'm talking about the masses, the people that we're bringing education as a weapon, education as a tool, education as a good. Educators have that special knowledge to engage, and it is special. And the second part is that, again, you're transferring knowledge. So one, I got your attention, right? That's the basic of engagement. I have your attention. You're listening, you're reading, you're hearing, you're seeing, you're thinking. That's hard. It's much harder than people think. The second part is, now that I've got your attention, what do I have to say? And that's that sort of exciting place where the educator who has specialized content knowledge, is a subject matter expert, is now going to use the fact that they lulled the student in. Gotten your attention. I can engage you, which is, again, special technique, special tools. We're going to do many programs on this. And now I have this body of knowledge, and I'm going to transfer it. And that's incredibly difficult because how you transfer it has to be individualized. Some of the things about technology that are great is it allows educators to create content, and then students can absorb it and disseminate it on their own schedule and as many times as they need to, which is important. That's a wonderful opportunity. But the idea that the content just on the face of it doesn't need an educator to absorb it, digest it, and then engage that non-interested, non-motivated student, that's the whole purpose, right? If everybody was an autodidact and could teach themselves, then you don't ever need any formal education. With the advent of a library, which has existed in different forms for a long time in our human history, you never should have needed any teachers. Everyone would have been up on their own, educating themselves and curious and interested. I wonder a little bit more about biology, or what can I learn about basics of the Spanish language. You wouldn't ever have needed any educators, but it doesn't work like that in society. Humans aren't all interested in the same things. We're not all provided the same opportunities. Part of what makes education so powerful is you take information that people either didn't know or weren't aware of, and you bring it to them. You engage them, which is, I'm getting your attention, and then I'm transferring knowledge, so that when that experience ends, they've left with more than they came with. Something new or interesting, or something they weren't aware of, or something they'd heard of but didn't understand, and then they're able to act on that, and that's what makes it a powerful weapon. Did I say in there that the educator is, again, trying to understand what it's like to be 12 years old, or what it's like to be 65 years old and work in a certain educational organization? No, you don't need to get inside of every single aspect of the student's life. So if their gender, their age, or ethnicity, all this, it's interesting somewhat, I guess, but that's not the connection. The connection is a human connection. And if you look at the power of the arts, you look at what artists can do, even across languages and across time. I'll read a poem by someone that didn't live anywhere near the same time I've lived. A totally different life, and yet it touched me. It got my attention and it transferred knowledge. I never thought of that before. That's the power of what we do when we connect. How much is too much and how much is not enough? We're going to do a second episode of this show. And I'm going to go over some of the second episode, so we can go over some of the techniques and tools when some people do spend way too much on the connection part, and I think mislabeling it for whether the student likes them, which is not the same, and not enough on the transfer of knowledge, and there are other people who have the other problem. So, thank you for joining me for part one of the now a two-part show. And as always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information and join us for part two. Thank you.